Okay, here is our example magazine. I'm going to walk you through all the steps just of the cover before you begin your design. So this is a magazine cover in the works. Obviously, it's a little different than the last Spain edition that I did. But I would like to start you off by just showing you how to open a new InDesign document and set it up to do your cover and your two-page spread. So we're going to open one right over the top of this. We're just going to go File, New, Document. Now this document is going to be a 3-page document. Notice we need the cover and a 2-page spread. A spread is 2 pages next to each other so you can see how they would look as a magazine layout. Now letter size is what we want, which is actually the same as 8.5 by 11, and your orientation should be portrait or vertical like usual. Now remember, gutters are the spaces between where the fold is going to be, and we don't really want to change that right now. It's the setting is just fine. So let's go ahead and start. Actually, let's make sure we do make 2 columns, because when you do the inside of your magazine, you're going to have a requirement to use some columns. So we can always add or subtract to those later, but we're going to start with 2 columns before we hit OK. Alright, so here's your layout. Before we get working on this, I want to remind you how to set up your workspace. If, for instance, you lose a palette, you can't find your tools, I want to show you how to reset. So we're going to go up to Window, Workspace, Default Workspace, just like the other programs basically. And you're going to be able to double wide your tools over here or open up your palettes over here. Now one of the most important palettes when you're working in InDesign is your pages, because you're basically using these little thumbnails to see what you're doing on your big page. Now there are swatches. They look a little different than they do in the other programs. So instead of a bunch of squares, there really only are a couple. Now you can add to that if you want to, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. Now there's a very important set down here, and these are character palettes. This is how you work with text, paragraphs, styles, and all of those things will be pretty important as well. The toolbar looks very similar to Illustrator, as does your workspace. So we're going to start just by kind of filling the front cover with color. Now don't worry too much about this column setup in here. You can hide this or keep it. I'm going to keep it for now, but I'm going to show you how we can start with putting in just a basic colored background for your magazine. So I'm going to just get my square tool. Now notice there's a square with an X and there's a regular square. The regular square is what I'm going to start with to add color, and I'm just going to drag over the whole workspace. And I want to go with, I'm going to double click here. I'm just going to pick like a sort of a pale blue for my background, and I'm going to hit OK. Notice you can actually see a little image of the color that you chose for your background right there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place a picture on my cover. Now remember, an eye-catching picture for your cover is kind of important. Magazines are usually drawing their viewers by the exciting color covers. So this is different than this. This is actually a frame to hold a picture. So I'm going to actually drag that shape nice and big across the whole document. And notice there's an X in there. That's waiting for you to place an image. So right away I'm going to go File, Place, and luckily I've already made my folder called Spain. I could look through this and see which picture might be best for my cover, and I'm thinking I'm going to use this beachy picture. So I'm going to choose that and hit Open. Great, so it fits really well. Now I may want to make it smaller or bigger. There's something really important to know about InDesign. When you shrink it smaller or bigger by even just holding your Shift key, notice that the picture gets cropped or cut. And sometimes you don't want that. So I'm going to go Edit, Undo, Resize Item. Now if you did want to make a picture smaller or bigger, you have to hold Command and Shift. So try holding Command and Shift together when you shrink something. That way the proportions will stay the same. I'm going to undo that because I think it fits really well just right in the center of my space. Okay, so now we need what's called a masthead. A masthead is the title of your magazine, and it's supposed to be really large, and that's where you can use a fun novelty font if you'd like to. Notice on my example I chose something really bold but also kind of modern. So I'm going to go to my T tool. And when you're working in InDesign, you're not just clicking and typing. Notice that doesn't give you a cursor like Illustrator does. You're going to drag a nice big box, and I do it off to the side, and then I place it. So I use my white space on the side a lot. You might find a different way works best, but I like to click off to the side, and I'm going to type Spain. Okay, now I'm going to highlight it next, and I'm going to look around for a font that I think will really make an interesting magazine cover. So thought about this one. It looks a little bit too techno though, and then I thought Star Avenue would be really nice. Now see how it's still really small. I'm not going to use my black arrow or anything there. I'm going to actually use right up here my type size. I'm going to go really big, and I'm still not quite big enough, so I can just keep clicking, or I might even just type in 174. Now when I do that, notice that it made this little red box and everything disappeared, and that can be really frustrating. This red box means that there is more in here that doesn't fit. So if I just drag this out, I notice that Spain, the word, will come right back. Now this is called a text box, and you can actually kind of shrink these so that they fit the word that you're using. I'm going to pull this over and place it where my masthead would be. I like the fact that this touches the edge here. I'm going to go right up to the edge, which would be considered a bleed, meaning that it would run right off the edge of my magazine. Okay, so I'm going to keep working here, and the next thing I need to do is put in an issue date. So magazines usually tell you when they came out. So I'm going to get my T tool again, drag a little box, and I'm just going to type November 2012. So there's my little date. I'm going to triple click on it. I'm going to also use a more interesting font, but not the same as my title, my masthead. I want that to be all on its own in a novelty, but I'm going to use this 2-cent regular for most of the rest of my body text. It's kind of similar, but it's not too decorative. Now this is still kind of small, so I'm going to raise the size of this just a bit. Your cover text kind of has a lot of variety with size. The inside of your magazine should stick to a 12-point font for the body text, but we're going to go with this. I'm going to put that right above Spain. I might even kind of shove it up here. Now you'll notice all these lines are collecting, and some people really get frustrated with that. I tend to leave them there because they really help you grid things, but if you want to get rid of those as you're working, you can just go to your View menu, and you can go down to Hide Frame Edges. That gets rid of those blue. And then if you want to hide your columns as well, you can go back to View, and you can also say Grids and Guides, Hide Guides. Now the problem with this is you really don't have anything to line things up with. So I tend to leave that going, but every once in a while people find that really frustrating. So I'm going to go back to Grids and Guides, Show My Guides. I'm going to go View, back to Frame Edges, Show Frame Edges. Until I'm done, then I want to see my actual view. And there are other ways to see your view as well, but for now we're just going to continue. Now I need to highlight 3 articles. There should be maybe 3 cities, maybe 3 activities, whatever you're going to highlight. And I want to do something kind of different with mine. So I'm going to get my rectangle tool, and I'm going to make a rectangle down here. And I'm going to make these kind of a pink, going for sort of a pink and blue theme. So I'm going to find a pink-ish color, maybe this one here. And I'm going to save this color in my swatches. Notice it shows up right here too. I can pull that right down into my swatches, and it'll stay there. So now every time I want to use that color, it's right there. I don't have to go find it again this way. I can just say, oh, those are the colors I'm using on my magazine. So I want 3 little rectangles. I'm going to use these to put the title of my articles in here. So I'm going to get those 3 set up. And I want to be, I'm going to write my articles about Madrid, Barcelona, and Sevilla, 3 main towns in Spain. I'm going to get my T tool, drag a text box. The first one I'm going to say Madrid. Now again, I'm using a type style that doesn't necessarily match everything else. I'm going to go back into my fonts and choose the same one that I was using for my date. I'm also going to raise the size just a bit and drag this whole box down onto this rectangle. Now it's the same as Illustrator in here, where if you can't see something, if it's in front or back, remember you can always go Object, Arrange, Send to Back, Send to Front, whatever you're doing with that. I still feel like that's too small, and I also think I'm going to make it more bold. I'm going to do bold, and then I'm going to make that just a couple clicks bigger, so I'm at 20 point for that. Now I like to take my text boxes and sort of shrink them when I don't need all that extra space. Now same goes with your Option key here. I'm going to Option drag down and Option drag down. Now obviously all three articles are not about Madrid, but the next one is about Barcelona, and the next one is about Sevilla. So now I've got all my text here. Now sometimes it's hard to line things up. Let's say I have all my words kind of out of order. If I hold my Shift key and click on each of the text layers or words, and I look up here, I notice I've got these little align effects. I can line these all up together, and now they're perfectly lined up in those little boxes. Okay, so I kind of like what I've got here so far. I am going to add a couple things. Here's my example. My other example, I had a guide to Spain's most popular cities, special travel edition. So I'm going to type those two things, get my T tool out here. A guide to Spain's most popular cities. Okay, and I want to make sure that is matching the type style that we had before, which is right here. And I'm going to go with, I think, just my regular on that one. And I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. So triple click, go right up here, make it nice and big. Notice what's happening now is my text box I made smaller. So if I just stretch that a bit, the text will change size inside of it. Okay, now I put it right here, and I actually, on the other example, I put a black box underneath the next step. So this part is on its own. It kind of fits really well right in this space between the words. So think about ways you can make your text really fit in a space. Sometimes it feels a little cramped. I'm going to scoot it to the right just a bit here. And then I had a black bar, so I'm going to use my regular square tool, and I put a nice little shape right over here, and I wanted to fill it with black, so I just flipped these. Okay, and then that one said special travel edition, so make a text box, special travel edition. Okay, this time I'm choosing that font again, but I'm going to go with an italic, just because this is sort of a special kind of announcement here. And I can't make it too big because I want it to fit inside that shape. So when I put this over here on top, you'll notice I can't see it because it's black on black. So I instantly want to make sure I choose a color that I can see. So I'm going to go with the white. I could go with the pink too. That might be a nice touch. Let me see if I can get that in the pink. Yeah, I like that. So placing this over here, maybe off to the right. Now your cover, you have freedom to go outside your margins. Those are basically for your interior pages. So feel free to go off those edges if you want to. All right, now the next step, we're going to do kind of a special feature on the front. This is special feature on flamenco dancing. So I happen to have this flamenco dancer that I've already collected, and I'm going to just go without making any frame or picture space. I'm going to go File, Place, and I'm going to find that flamenco dancer in my pictures here and hit Open. Now notice no matter what, wherever I drag, this flamenco dancer is following me, and if I just click, she opens up to her regular size. Okay, I actually want to create a clipping mask, so cut out the white space. Now remember, we're in vector again, so we can't just erase it. We need to do something special to it, which is called a clipping mask. So now I'm going to go up to Object, Clipping Path, Options. Now the clipping path is basically going to figure out for me where the white is. And all I do to make it happen is click on Detect Edges. Now that probably wouldn't have worked very well if I hadn't already selected a picture that was already white background pretty much, so it worked out well for me. If you try this and it doesn't work out well, it's most likely because you chose a picture that's going to be difficult. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to move my flamenco dancer. If I wanted to keep fixing it too, I can zoom way in and adjust the white dots just like we do in Illustrator. But I think she's good here. I'm going to pull this up a bit. I may put my barcode here and I may put it down at the bottom. It just depends. And now remember, if I want to make it bigger, I have to do Shift and Command to make her bigger. Kind of like this nice big feature here. I like how it kind of drifts off the edge, and might even put her down here. Now one thing I don't like is that her hand is kind of hard to see behind the beach. So I'm going to get a circle tool, and I'm just going to make a nice big circle right here. And I want to make that kind of a neutral color. So sometimes what's nice is you can get your eyedropper tool. Maybe I just want a color like the sand. And see if I can get that to show up here. I can't, so I'm going to do it myself manually. I'm just going to choose sort of a sandy color. And now my circle's on top of her face, which I don't want. I want to click on this, and I want to bring it to the front. Object, Arrange, Bring to Front, just like in Illustrator. Circle got a little bit too big for me here because now I can't see parts of my beach that I liked. So I'm going to go back to my circle, make it a little smaller, and I'm going to scoot the circle down. Okay, now we could be using layers here, and I kind of steer clear of layers at first just to get people familiar with the program as you're working. So I've got the circle, and I now want to put some text around it. So I'm going to click on the circle. Notice I keep having to move her down so that I can fit and grab things. I could probably lock one or the other so that doesn't happen. But now I've got the circle, and if I get my T that has text on a path, and just click right at the edge of the circle, I could say special flamenco dancing feature inside. Okay, now that text is pretty small, but I can triple click, make it bigger. I also can double click on the tool and decide if I want this to go inside. So I could go into the bottom, descender or ascender. So that kind of goes inside the circle. And I might also want to adjust my font to make it consistent. Again, you don't want a million different fonts when you're designing a magazine. It gets a little bit cluttery if you get more than 3 fonts inside. Okay, so I think that I've got most of my main features. Remember to check your assignment sheet always, always, always to know if you're missing something. And it does say I need a barcode, and I also need an issue date, which I have. I have a color harmony. I'm going with sort of my shades of blue and soft pink. And I will just add my barcode, which is pretty easy. Just going to go File, Place, get my barcode that I've already collected, and I'm going to place it out here and then shrink it so that I can go Command Shift and then pull it into wherever I want it to be. So I think that's a good spot for my barcode. And this is pretty much a nice way to show your cover. Now remember, again, if you want to hide any of your frame edges, or if you want to go hide your grids and guides, you basically have what you're going to be seeing. Now one last thing you can do is if you go to View, Display Performance, and go High Quality Display, oftentimes some of your images will get a little clearer. Now she's obviously not a very high resolution image, and that's just what you get when you're using imagery that way. So there's your cover.